I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story and welcome to Friday, the 25th of August. Did you know it's only 4 months till Christmas? My wife hates it when I say that. Tonight we're going to talk about green energy. It's a big part of the future, but getting everything built and in place, well, not as easy or as fast as you might think. And a plan for wind turbines off the Oregon coast is a great example of that. And that's our big story tonight. If you've been to the ocean, you know the wind blows like a lot. So why not harness some of the wind to make electricity? The federal government thinks that's a great idea. In fact, they've picked 2 areas off the coast of southern Oregon where they think a couple of big wind farms should be built way out there in the water. Sounds like a cool idea, right? Well, not to everyone. Environmental reporter Cale Williams has our story.
Sometime in the not-too-distant future, the ocean off the southern Oregon coast could be the state's newest power plant. And we got one step closer last week when the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, also known as BOEM, announced 2 draft wind energy areas, one off the coast of Brookings and another to the north near Coos Bay. Diane Brandt, Oregon director with the nonprofit Renewable Northwest, said offshore wind in Oregon could provide an important way to supplement Oregon's other renewables, like land-based wind, hydro, and solar.
It's another diverse resource that we have to be able to add to our clean electricity grid.
As Oregon works toward a goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2040, the state will become increasingly reliant on wind, solar, and hydro. But those kinds of renewables aren't always consistent. The wind off the southern Oregon coast, thought to be some of the best in the country for generating power, could fill in some of those gaps.
Is blowing at times opposite or complementary to onshore wind. And so it just is another resource to give us a variety of attributes and resources on our grid to make sure that we're getting the electricity when we need it.
That's part of
But
the
not
process.
everyone saw the recent announcement as a step forward.
They're not listening to coastal communities. They're not listening to the fishing industry. They're not listening to congressional representatives.
That's Heather Mann, executive director of the Midwater Trawlers Cooperative, based in Newport. The 32 boats she represents all fish in the areas where this offshore wind farm would go. And they're all worried about what constructing and operating hundreds of floating wind turbines would mean for their livelihoods.
If you fish with a trawl net, you won't be able to be in there. Long line, you won't be able to be in there.
Mann also has concerns about potential unintended consequences of a relatively new technology being put in an environmentally sensitive area.
When the dams were put in, everybody thought that was great. Renewable energy, inexpensive, and we have those things. But we also put salmon on the brink of extinction, and that was an unintended consequence of that renewable energy.
And she isn't the only one with concerns. Earlier this week, the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians released a statement questioning the process. The tribe supports any green economic development project that follows the law and does not harm local fishing jobs, our environment, or tribal cultural resources. We cannot support offshore wind development until we are provided assurance that it will do good and not harm the tribe, its members, and the greater community. In June, Governor Kotek sent a letter to BOEM asking the agency to pause development of offshore wind in Oregon so the concerns of people like Mann and the tribes could be addressed. BOEM didn't exactly pause the process, but they did extend the comment period on the new areas from 30 to 60 days, and they plan to hold several meetings in coastal communities to hear from the people who would be most impacted. For Mann, having a meeting and having her concerns recognized are 2 very different things.
BOEM will hold as many meetings as you want. And there's good people that work at BOEM. You say, can we hold a meeting? Can you talk on the phone? Oh, yeah. But it's a one-way relationship. It's not authentic engagement.
Mann hopes the federal government will take a step back and reconsider where they want to put the wind farms. But she also recognizes that development off the Oregon coast is part of a larger push for offshore wind. The Biden administration has set a goal of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. And Oregon's wind farms, if built, could provide up to 2.6 of those gigawatts. Mann, she thinks that BOEM has put approving the project above the concerns of her community.
At the end of the day, what BOEM is interested in is leasing the land, getting that auction going so that they can check a box for the administration's goals of by 2030 having 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy in place.
Mann has also heard from some people who suggest that any fishing jobs that are lost to wind power could easily be replaced by the green economy. And that does not sit well with her.
And aside from being deeply offensive, that kind of a comment shows how little people understand about fishing communities, that most of my fishermen are second and third generation, passed down from their fathers and grandfathers, and they're passing down to their sons and daughters.
Brandt said the combination of clean energy goals, along with increasing demand, are creating pressure. But that's not an excuse for ignoring people like Mann.
We really do need to understand the potential impacts to the fisheries and to other existing ocean users, because the ocean is not an empty place.
Kale's with me now, and super interesting story. The question is, how long is all this going to take?
Well, it's a very complicated process, and it does not move quickly. I figured it'd probably be a little bit easier to show you than to tell you. So we've got here a timeline from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and we're here. This is where they've identified the areas where they want to put these offshore wind farms. From there, there's going to be public leasing notices. That's when the developers can bid on these, and eventually they will sell at auction. Then we get into this site assessment and surveys, and that can take up to 5 years. Once those are done, then they will submit their construction and operations plan, and then there'll be another 2 years of environmental and technical reviews, and that all needs to happen before they can start construction.
So 8 to 10 years maybe?
Yeah, at a minimum, if things go smoothly, which they rarely do.
Yeah, and if there's no lawsuits that hijack or freeze everything.
Precisely.
Also, how many are going to be involved and how far offshore?
So we know how far offshore they'll be. These areas that they've set out are between 15 and 20 miles off the coast of Brookings and Coos Bay. How many wind turbines there will be, still kind of up to the developer, but likely hundreds.
Huh. All right, interesting. Thanks, Cale Williams, for keeping us updated. You got 10 more years of stories on this. And while we're on the topic of the environment, a big announcement yesterday at Portland City Hall. Commissioner Carmen Rubio released a plan to invest an estimated $750 million into climate programs over the next 5 years. The money would come from the Portland Clean Energy Tax on big retailers in the city. If Rubio's plan passes, it would be the largest investment in climate-related projects in Portland's history. After years of couple of deadly heat waves, drought, and wildfire smoke, Rubio said there's no time to waste.
The need to address climate crisis cannot be any clearer. It's the first environmental initiative led by communities of color in Oregon and the first program of its kind in the United States.
That $750 million would mostly be paid through grants separated into several categories. They would include $474 million for energy efficiency upgrades to residential and commercial buildings, $128 million toward decarbonizing the transportation sector. $70 million would go to green infrastructure with a focus on improving Portland's tree canopy. $41 million for investments in green jobs and workforce development, and another $20 million for carbon storing agriculture. Now, before you go applying for some of these grants, you're going to have to wait just a bit. The investment plan is expected to go before the City Council within the next couple of weeks, and officials say they hope to have a final vote by the end of September. Let's turn now to our homeless crisis and a closer look at a program aimed at getting people off the streets and into housing. Multnomah County launched this particular effort a year ago, but the money has already run out. And a lack of funds means that some homeless families are actually facing a return to the streets. So, will the county use any of the millions of unspent homeless funds that it's been holding on to? Blair Best has our story.
Last spring, Multnomah County launched Move In Multnomah, an attempt at getting people off the streets and into housing. By using supportive housing services dollars, so taxpayer money, the county paid landlords to house homeless people by covering most of a year's rent for more than 200 households. Brandy Tuck, who runs Path Home in Southeast Portland, works with about 20 of those families.
It sounds exactly like a great program on paper.
And what was the reality?
Well, so the reality was that the rent guarantee was great. We were able to offer 12 months of rent assistance to families. That's super. The challenge was that we got a lot of rent assistance, but we didn't get any resources for case managers.
A critical piece, Tuck says, to keeping people housed.
To help them manage their budgets, learn new skills, get a better job or an employment situation where they'll be able to pay their rent after their rent assistance ends.
And there was another issue. Just a few months after the program launched, the county told providers like Tuck it would end after 1 year.
I would not call this program a long-term success.
Though the county just gave the families housed through the program an additional 3 months of rent support. That runs out this fall.
And there probably will be some families that end up homeless again. I wish that the county had come to the providers and had dialogue with us about what we needed and how we could have made this program successful.
Now, turns out Multnomah County ended up building off of the Move-In Multnomah program with another similar program called Housing Multnomah Now. Now, bear with me, I know it can be a lot to keep track of. That second program doesn't focus on homeless families anymore. Instead, it focuses on homeless individuals. Many of them camp right here in Old Town under the Steel Bridge. Back in June, outreach workers like William Casting submitted housing applications for more than a dozen people in this camp.
The meat and potatoes of this process is developing that relationship, identifying their barriers to housing, and then working through those barriers.
Tony Hunter, who we also met in June, was one of the people they helped.
It's actually amazing. I'm still waiting, so she told me she'll come out tomorrow to talk to me and let me know.
But that wasn't the case for everyone.
They offered to help me, and it didn't happen. I'm still here.
In a tent under the bridge.
I'm still homeless. I'm still a drug addict and everything else.
With no sign of getting out.
The program would be better if they would help more people.
Now, to help more people, like that man in Old Town, homeless providers are urging the county to spend some of their $65 million unspent dollars meant for homeless services on programs like these, since there has been some success. A county spokesperson tells us they'll be working with these providers to try and provide some long-term assistance to homeless households. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Interesting story. Up next on The Story, there's a new law in the state of Washington that could mean faster deliveries to your door. The law has to do with bathrooms, of all things, and it passed unanimously in Olympia earlier this year. So how can a bathroom law influence package deliveries? Oh, wait till you see this. We'll explain when The Story returns. A new state law in Washington could end up being a model for the whole rest of the country. What's it all about? Bathrooms for truck drivers. Yep, you heard that right. Stick with me here. Big rig drivers in Washington are now allowed to use a business bathroom whenever they're making a delivery or picking up a shipment at some place. The law went into effect a month ago after passing unanimously in Olympia. So why does something like that matter to you and me? Well, Drew Mickelson with our sister station in Seattle heard from one driver who says it could speed up deliveries a lot, reducing your wait times for packages.
Truck drivers say this is a serious problem, so they are celebrating this new law. They say it eliminates a barrier that has been slowing them down, and it was a problem that was only magnified by the pandemic.
You want to make sure that when you get there, you can go.
Tilden Curl has driven trucks more than 30 years, and he guesses more than 3 million miles.
I've got 741,000 on this truck.
When he goes back and forth from Olympia to Los Angeles, he sleeps and eats in his truck, but there's no restroom on board. And some days, that is a job hazard.
Sometimes you go, I'll wait till the next rest area. And then you get 2 miles from it and it says rest area is closed. That's when panic sets in.
Curl says it's not easy pulling over his 75-foot-long truck on the side of the road or stopping off at a gas station. So he was thrilled when the state enacted a law this summer guaranteeing restroom rights for truck drivers. Business owners that use drivers for either shipping or receiving must now allow them access to restrooms, just like other employees.
You have to do something. And going out in the wild like a bear does is just kind of not really the thing to do, you know.
Washington's the first state to ensure restroom access. And the state's trucking association says the law is being used as a model in Washington, D.C. to perhaps guarantee the right nationwide.
What can I say? It's very important, you know, in planning your day.
Curl says the law makes his job safer, will speed up his delivery times, and improves morale in an industry that never slowed down in the pandemic.
During COVID, a lot of people didn't want you to come into their facility to use their restroom. I mean, you were the hero, but you couldn't go use the restroom, you know.
Something I hadn't really thought about. Glad they've taken care of that. Drew Mickelson reporting on it. Still ahead on the story, our history segment, Digging for Old, airs on Mondays, but we have a unique look back tonight at what may have been Oregon's first murder, and it has ties to a town that no longer exists just south of Corvallis. Stick around for that when the story returns. With your generous help, the KGW School Supply Drive has raised enough cash and supplies to send 13,000 kids back to class with the supplies they need. You can still help even more. Give online. Just head to kgw.com/school and click Donate Cash. If you'd like to donate in person, we'll be collecting at the Portland Timbers game tomorrow. Just stop by Gate F on the corner of 20th and Morrison to drop off pencils, crayons, or markers. We want to say thank you to On Point Community Credit Union, Safeway, Pacific Power, and Dick's Auto Group for everything they're doing to help make this year's supply drive a great success. Well, if you ever wondered how your city got its name, we have you covered. It's time for another edition of What's in a Name. This time, Devin Haskins takes us south of Corvallis to the former town of Genneopolis.
Lost in the brambles of the Hudson family's farm, a piece of Genneopolis' history. The land that was Genneopolis is nothing more than wheat fields and farms just south of Corvallis.
It did have a flouring mill, it had the post office and a mercantile. There was roughly about 50 people at its founding.
That's Jolene Thompson, vice chair of the Albany Landmarks Commission, who also calls herself,
I always say, armchair historian.
Genneopolis was a small town founded by Richard Irwin, who came from Ohio to set up a store.
It was short in its time, but very impactful in its existence, especially as far as a lot of the dramatic things that happened in Genneopolis.
Westward expansion drove thousands here to the Oregon Territory in the mid-1800s, including right here in what was Genneopolis. One of the men that wanted his 320-acre land claim and another 320 for his wife was a man named Nimrod O'Kelly.
Nimrod O'Kelly comes along. He has been planning this basically all his life.
O'Kelly came to Oregon in 1846 at the age of 65 and settled in Genneopolis. Under the Organic Act passed in 1843, O'Kelly staked his claim of the 640 acres he thought he was entitled to. As more settlers moved to the area and staked their claims, 3 sides of O'Kelly's land were being encroached upon. One of those settlers is Jeremiah Mahoney. It was on May 22, 1852, that O'Kelly's frustration with Mahoney came to a boiling point.
Jeremiah Mahoney was on Nimrod O'Kelly's property. Nimrod approaches him. He has a rifle in his hand.
Nimrod O'Kelly claims Jeremiah Mahoney threatened him with a thresher tool, and that's when Nimrod shot and killed him.
Nimrod O'Kelly, after shooting Jeremiah Mahoney, immediately walked himself to Marysville, which is now Corvallis, to turn himself in for what happened.
This is Nimrod O'Kelly's confession, where he writes about Mahoney saying, he continued coming towards me, saying if I did not mind, I would get it thrashed out over my head. Continuing on, Nimrod says, before getting near enough to me to get a hold of the gun went off in my hands, hitting him. This begins the years-long ordeal of O'Kelly's fate. Genneopolis founder Richard Irwin ordered an inquest, and a group of neighbors ultimately determined that O'Kelly should be held accountable. He was tried and sentenced to death by hanging.
But there are many people also working on Nimrod O'Kelly's behalf.
Over the next 2 years, his death sentence would get postponed by one governor, upheld by the Territorial Supreme Court, and ultimately commuted to 2 years of hard labor by another governor. O'Kelly is to be transferred to the state penitentiary in Portland to serve that labor sentence.
The sheriff and a deputy type person came to get Nimrod O'Kelly, who willingly went along and was glad to do so.
The 3 men made the trek by wagon from Genneopolis to Portland, but stopped around the Oregon City area.
Someone ingested too much alcohol, became drunk, was not able to move along, and ultimately this led to Nimrod O'Kelly moving along without them.
O'Kelly, determined to get his sentence of hard labor over and done with, started walking to Portland by himself.
Nimrod O'Kelly comes to the front door of the penitentiary and says, I'm here, let's get this over with. And the folks at the penitentiary are looking at him thinking, what on earth are we going to do with this man? And they actually ask him, can he come back?
O'Kelly was booked into the penitentiary in May of 1855 and would only serve 10 months of his sentence before being pardoned by a governor in March of 1856, putting an end to the first reported murder in Oregon's history.
O'Kelly would die in 1864. And during this entire ordeal, his land claim would not get settled until 1881, 17 years after his death. And back on the farm,
I haven't seen it in 20 years.
The grave marker for the Irwins, Jenneopolis's founding family. Devin Haskins, KGW News.
So cool. I always learn so much. Thanks for those reports, Devin. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember the story, our collective story? Well, that never ends. Stick around now. Straight Talk with Laurel Porter is coming up next, but there's a special guest host, Ashley Korsland, filling in for Laurel. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday at 6:30.